evening, everyone. I'm Donna Feldman, Assistant Director of Alumni Relations at Marist and a graduate from the class of 2015. Welcome to Wednesday Wisdom Live with our host, Dr. Helen Rothberg. Tonight's session is entitled The Best Policy, which will include the recipe for the truth, which can be made as a mocktail or a cocktail. This is the fourth session of Helen's 6-session series. If you encounter any audio issues, you do have the option to dial in by telephone. I have provided that number and code in the chat box. Due to the number of participants, we have muted all lines except for the host. We are going to reserve the chat option for technical questions you have or general questions for Marist staff who are listening. Please do not send private messages to Helen. Please use the Q&A feature for questions that you have and be sure to direct your questions to the host. There are several ways you can view this presentation on your screen. If you hover over the top right corner of the video portion of your screen with your mouse, small icons should appear. Since Helen will not be using slides, the recommended choice is active speaker view. There will be a brief survey on your screen at the conclusion of the webinar with 5 questions. It should pop up as a new tab in your browser once the call is ended. If you have a minute, it would be extremely helpful for us to hear your feedback. For now, I would like to introduce our host, Dr. Helen Rothberg. Welcome, Helen. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Dr. Helen Rothberg is Professor of Strategy at Marist. In addition to her professorship at Marist, Professor Rothberg is senior faculty at the Academy of Competitive Intelligence and is principal of H&R Associates. She has published extensively with Scott Erickson on topics including competitive intelligence, intellectual capital management, and knowledge management. Helen's latest book, The Perfect Mix, Everything I Know About Leadership I Learned as a Bartender, was published by Simon Schuster in 2017 and now in its 3rd printing. With Scott Erickson, she has also published Intelligence in Action, Strategically Managing Knowledge Assets, and Knowledge to Intelligence, Building Advantage in the Next Economy. Okay. Welcome, Helen. Thanks again.
Thank you, and thank you again to my friends in the alumni office, Donna and Amy Woods and Amanda Benton. I really appreciate you welcoming me and giving me this opportunity to connect with my Red Foxes and friends. So hey, Red Foxes, great to see you on this beautiful first summer night that we get to be together. And beautiful night it is, isn't it? So what we've been talking about on Wednesday Wisdom Live has been how to really lead yourself. And we've been using the advice model from The Perfect Mix, this little yellow book back here. Everything I Know About Leadership I Learned as a Bartender. And the advice model that we've talked about so far, we talked about action, which was do more and say less. The title of that was One Person's Treasure, and we talked about looking at situations that we have no control over other than our responses as shit or fertilizer. The second, the D in advice, was on determination and how to get things done with civility and ingenuity. The third session, which was the V in advice, was on vision. And I asked you to think about if you were managing yourself or leading yourself. Were you using sight or vision to make your choices about where to bring you? And we talked about how to understand where your vision comes from, needs and values, and how to look at that and what questions to ask yourself. And tonight we're going to continue a little bit with that understanding of needs and values as we talk about the I in the advice model, which is integrity. Integrity is a word we hear about all the time, but what does it really mean? Integrity really means being honest, doing the right thing, not creating drama and not playing into drama. And integrity has a couple of elements, and I want to talk about those elements, authenticity and transparency, and then use this whole bundle of authenticity and transparency as it creates your integrity. And then how do you approach leading in this particular time? What's unique about this particular time is most of us are engaging with each other through this medium online. There's not as many or probably none at this point, interpersonal interactions with teams and people you work with. So how do you build those relationships? How do you lead people, and how do you build a team that you might have never met? And my answer to all of that is it's based on integrity, on authenticity and transparency. So let's talk about that first. Authenticity. Authenticity really means coming from a real place, coming from who you really are. And how do we know who we really are? You know, as we grow up, we're sponges. We're taking on the characteristics of all of those people in our environment, in our family, at our schools, in our community, where we worship, where we play sports. We take on the characteristics of those people we admire. We take on the belief system, perhaps, of our parents or our older siblings. And as we mature, we're like sponges, right? And as we mature, we slowly begin to shapeshift. And the question becomes, wow, is that belief I have or that feeling I have, is that really mine? Or is that really somebody else's? You know, it's wonderful to have a role model and a mentor. It's wonderful to admire people, but they're not you. Only you can be you. And wherever that authenticity lies, it's going to come from the things that you need as a person to be whole and the things that you value. And as you mature and change through life, because it's strange how we all stay the same and change all the time, we begin to shift, and that begins to shift with us, what we believe, what we hold dear and true to ourselves. So what is authentic? Who are we really? And I think you need to understand a lot about that before you work in teams and build teams and lead others, because whatever the team is, it's you. You're bringing yourself to the team, and other people are bringing who they are, their needs, their values, their beliefs, their personalities to the team, their past experiences, their perceptions. It's very complex. So the best you can do, the only thing you really have control over is you and who you are. And authenticity comes from, and the way we see it in people, a lot of different places. The first thing I would say is say what you mean and then do what you say, right? Being authentic is fulfilling a promise, right? Brands are most authentic when they fulfill a promise. If you believe in something, if you think something's important, you need to behave that way. So we all know people who say, oh, you know, I'm really patient and caring, and I like to relate to my community and look at myself as a citizen of the world. And then you're in your car behind somebody at a red light, and the minute the light turns green, if they don't step on the gas, you're honking the horn. That doesn't really align with what you're saying or who you say you are. Or you're driving behind an older person, and the way you know it's an older person is sometimes you can't even, you know, see their heads over the dashboard, right? If you're looking ahead, it looks like just a headless driver, and you're honking because they're not going fast enough. And you say things like, hey, if you can't drive the speed limit, don't be in your car. But what's the big deal? They're an older person. If they could drive faster, they would. If they could walk faster in the street, they would. So what? If you have to get someplace 3 minutes later, or you have to hold a door, or you have to give up a seat, so what? What's the big deal? So if you say you're a community-minded person and you're patient and you care about the needs of others, if you're authentically going to be that way, you have to be that way. It means when you're in a meeting, you let people finish their sentences. You try to understand what they also need. You don't only come from what you need. Look, we all bring ourselves to an organization to help an organization fulfill its goal, but also to fulfill our own. And there is a happy medium between the two. How you get there is how authentic you are when you arrive. Who are you really? And how do we know who we really are? You know, I have this phrase, I tell people there's a lot of flavors in my ice cream cone. I am kind of the 61-year-old hippie who likes to wear her flip-flops and not comb her hair and listen to music and dance as much as I can, anywhere I can, with whomever I can. But I'm also that very serious analyst, that strategist, who can put on a suit and carry a briefcase and go into a boardroom and command attention. I also am that educator in the classroom who really believes at the bottom of my heart that my role is to help people find what's magnificent in themselves. Because if I could do that, then my students will be okay, all of you, wherever you are. And if I really believe that, my behaviors have to align with that. So authenticity it's tricky, right? It's about reflecting on what your beliefs are. It's about whether or not you're trying to be like someone else because that's who you believe they want you to be. You know, we all try to read people's minds, and guess what? You can't. And we want to satisfy the people we work for. We want to be like them. We want to be like people we admire. But you know what? You can only be who we really are. We have to be authentic. We're much more than the likes. Those of you who have been in class with me know how much I dislike the word like. But if you look at Facebook, and I don't know if you get liked or not on Instagram, we're more than that. We're more than how much people will acknowledge us. It's nice to be acknowledged. We like that. It lets us know we're going in the right direction, but it's not a measure of who we are. So the first complicated task in entering a situation is understanding who you are and trying to be authentic from that point on. The next piece is transparency. So what does transparency really mean? It means to be able to see through to the other side. It means there are no secrets, there are no lies, there are no fibs, there are no surprises. And when I say there are no lies, there aren't even any white lies. You know, some people believe that it's okay to tell a lie if it's going to keep someone's feelings from being hurt. It's okay to tell a lie because there might be a benefit on the other end for someone else. Is that really true? Because if you start with that, here's my line in the sand for a white lie. And if it works, that line keeps moving. And when is a white lie just a lie? And then if you're not going to tell the truth, if you're not going to be transparent, you better have a really good memory. So isn't it easier to just tell the truth? You know, people bring with them to meetings different agendas of things that have nothing to do with on the item list of what it is you're going to cover that night. It's they want to show how smart they are or how understanding they are or, you know, how much in favor they are of the person in charge, or none of that is really authentic and none of that is transparent, because if you come with an agenda, how could you give the whole of what you need to contribute? Why are you participating with others? What can you bring to the table? That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you're not transparent and authentic, how do people know where you stand? You know, I always say to people, please don't ask me my opinion unless you really want to know it, because I'm going to tell you the truth. And sometimes people don't want to hear the truth. And if that's so, then don't ask me my opinion. Again, something I said last week, I've learned to listen with 2 ears and speak with one mouth, because if my point of view is not being invited in, maybe people just don't want to really hear what I have to say. I don't need to speak to hear the sound of my voice. I will offer my opinion, my knowledge, my perspective if asked, but don't ask me if you don't really want to know, because I'm not going to white lie and I'm not going to sugarcoat. I am going to be transparent. And in the end, it's a lot less work to know, that's Rothberg. That's where she stands. I don't agree with her, which is fine, but at least I know where she's coming from. So when you take off this authenticity, being who you really are, saying what you mean and then doing what you say, and transparency, which is about telling the truth and not telling lies, and having people see through to who you really are, then we could begin to approach things with integrity, with honesty. Because what is it we're trying to create when we're building a team, when we're entering an organization, when we need to have people, if you will, follow our lead? We have to build trust. And you're never going to be able to build trust without being authentic or transparent. If you are always a different person when you show up to something, people are not going to know who you are or where you stand. They're not going to know when to invite you in and when not to invite you in. So we want to have integrity. We want to be honest. We want to do the right thing. We want to take responsibility for what we do. You know, none of us are perfect. And I promise you throughout your career, you're going to stub your toe many times. I have. And I think I've said before, that could be your greatest lesson. But when you don't do something right or say something right, or if you're communicating and your intention isn't being accepted the way you meant it to be, or you make choices that aren't the right choices for a company or for something in your team, even if it's well-intentioned, then the thing to do with integrity is to say, I was wrong, have ownership. I was wrong. I am sorry. I won't do that again. What can I do now to make it better? It's about taking full ownership, learning, and then being able to act differently. That's integrity. That's owning something as your own. And you know what? When you do that, you won't create drama around it. Where does drama come from? Drama comes from not wanting to accept the truth. Drama comes from buying into somebody else's truth, especially if you don't have all the facts. And then you could play into that drama and that drama blows up. And who needs it? Who needs all that? Isn't there enough drama in our lives right now to not have all this drama created for us, whether it's online or in other people's lives or in one of your social media accounts? Who needs the drama? But you know what? If you play into it, because you're human, it's okay. Forgive yourself, make your amends with integrity, as we just discussed, and then move on. Because the most perfect thing about ourselves is that we're not really perfect. So now that you have integrity and you have that sense of how you want to really present yourself to the world, how you will have your humility and respect for others and help for others, now you can think about how to manage a team. And if you've never met that team and now you're being introduced as a leader and the only way you're going to do it is virtually, you basically can do all the same things to lead that team or to become a team member that you would do if you were physically in the same space. You can be in the same space without physically being in the room, much as we are currently in the same space together. So first, do your research, know who's in the room with you. So easy to do on LinkedIn, or distribute bios from people. And perhaps have your first meeting or your first encounters be more about getting to know each other a little bit. You can ask people before they show up for the meeting to think about the best team they've ever been part of, or the best leader they've ever worked for, and the worst one, the worst team or the worst leader, and why. And from that, you'll begin to discover what people really value, because the things they value are going to show up in both what they really liked, what came out of it, and what didn't happen and what they needed. Right? So if you all begin to share and you create that open space, and you could even do some kind of icebreaker to create that space. And that's, if you need to know more about that, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn or social media and I can help with that. But if you create a space that's open, you'll begin to learn about people and people will begin to reveal themselves, and you could begin to give them space to be their authentic selves. Ask them what they really need of you. I always start my classes every semester with my rules. I've got my 5 rules. Those of you who've been in the classroom with me, you'll see it. Those of you who are interested, I have something about it, I believe, on my website, helenrothberg.com. But I make it very obvious. And then I ask my classes, what do you expect of me? And they're so surprised at that. But how do I know what people really need and what they really value if they don't tell me? By the way, death by PowerPoint has always been one thing, which is why you won't see one from me in this series. So you can begin to create familiarity and openness on the same medium with integrity by being your authentic self and creating transparency with your team. Tell them what you hope to achieve with them. Work on goal setting. What is the vision? What is it you want to work toward? How do you want to best work together? And then hold people accountable for that. You can use all of those skills, but first, take the risk of being your authentic self and giving them the space to do the same, and maybe use some of those questions I just offered up to you. If you're looking for a new job or entering a new job, you do the same thing. You present yourself as who you are. When you're in an interview, it's not just a company choosing you, but it's also you choosing them. And I understand right now there's some angst about, jobs are tight and I really need to support myself. And you might have to compromise some of what you value, but you can't compromise those things that are really foundational to who you are, because then you're not going to do well and you're going to be miserable. And that probably won't serve you well in future job searches either. So the I in advice is about integrity. It's about authenticity. It's about transparency. And it's about being honest and telling the truth. And I thought I would take an opportunity here, forgive me for reading something from my own book, The Perfect Mix. Integrity means standing strong for what you believe in, being honest about what you can do and cannot do, and treating others with the same moral and value standards that you hold yourself to. It means that you could sleep at night because your highest self has risen to an occasion. So it's about telling the truth. The truth. That's what tonight's cocktail is. It's really, I couldn't create a cocktail for you because this is about your truth, not my truth. Tonight, my truth is Bella de Brûlée. You could all see that. It's a pear liqueur that has some very complex notes. I'm going to drop just one melted cube in there. I'm going to give it the smallest splash because when you're in your truth, you really don't need to overdose on it. I'm going to take the time to savor my truth, to smell it, to look at it, whether it's a beautiful juice, whether it's a beautifully steeped tea, or your favorite treat. I'd like to make a toast, and I'd like to quote Oscar Wilde here, sort of quote him. Might as well be who you really are, because everybody else is already taken. So cheers to the truth. So lovely. Next week when we meet, we will be talking about the C in advice, communication. And the title of that is Live in Stereo. There will be a cocktail released earlier in the week with all the ingredients that I'll share with you, that I'm creating for you. And other than that, I hope you all stay well, happy and healthy. And I turn it over to our hosts to see if there are any questions.
Not sure if Donna saw anything come in through the Q&A box. I'm just checking the chat box right now. If anyone does have a question, feel free. You can actually put it in either right now if you want to do the chat or the Q&A. I guess I sort of have a question, Helen, about staying authentic with everything that's going on right now. Say you are currently looking for a job, whether you have one and you're just looking, or you really need one because you don't have a job right now. How, when everything's virtual,
do you stay authentic when everything is on a computer screen? You can't meet in person. They can't even really, I guess you can still mail a hard copy resume, but most likely that's going to be digital. When everything's digital, you know, how do you put yourself forward?
That's a great question. I would say first, think about what you really need and what you really value. One of the things I like to do when I create resumes with people is I have them give me I always say to them, give me a list of adjectives that describe you and why do you like this job? And then I craft a little statement about that up front. So what are the things about you that you think really reflect who you are, what you're good at, and what you bring to the table? And make sure that appears really cleanly right up front in that resume. And then I would do one other thing. I would look at, if you're honing in on a company, let's say, I would look at their mission statement. I would look at things that have come from their corporate communications office. I would look at anything that's been written there and see if their values and their mission kind of align with you. Did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Donna, was there anything else? Oh, she's on mute.
There was not, sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
So if anyone does have any questions.
I think we're good.
Okay, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us on this beautiful summer evening. I look forward to seeing you all next week, and stay well, stay happy.